Hello everyone and welcome to Rebel Way. My name is Andrew Sutherland and today we're going to be creating the sci-fi or magical portal effect. So let's jump into Houdini and take a look at how it was made. So starting out in SOPs, we just have a circle and it's oriented along the XY plane and it's scaled up. And let's put down an attribute VOP. And we're just going to connect this and say V for vector at rest, and that's going to equal the position. So now we're basically just storing the position in a attribute called rest. And we can later use this to, reference its original position. And here we're going to put down another point VOP. And let's take an add node and we're going to add a noise to the position. We're going to use this anti-AA noise and we need its current position because we're adding. And then we have a new position and that's with the noise, and we're just going to promote these parameters so we can control this noise outside. So diving back, and you can see we now have our settings exposed and we can manipulate this as we want, and we can change the frequency, and here we can just paste reference, so we change the one value and then all values will change. Different. So let's add an offset here, or we can reference that number. Put down another transform. Let's merge these together so we can see them. And we're just randomizing a few things here. It's just changing up a few things. So now we have some portal-ish looking thing. Let's make it save, and let's duplicate this circle a few more times. So we have that duplicated a few times. Merge these all together so we can see them, and of course it doesn't look like we've added any because they're on top of each other. So of course we need to just add some variation once again. Add an offset. This time, it's not going to be got different offsets for each channel. Same with this one. Let's remove it. And again, just more variation. Same process, just randomizing things. Same again. Same again, so more variation. Just changing the amplitude a bit. Come down to this transform and transform the scale. Same again. So we can just turn off. And this one's kind of different offset. This one different speed. Same, different speed, different offsets. Just trying to make this as random and as organic looking as possible. So just random variation. Cool. Save and it's play. And let's do an animation on all of them. So at the beginning, it's going to be, nothing. And then the portal's going to open up and give us this reveal. So coming over to frame 6. And it goes to its original size. Cool. Save once again. And let's add this texture UV so we get some UV coordinates. And we set this to arc length. And let's put down a point wrangle. And I've got this expression that's going to take each ID, so each curve has its ID, and we're gonna assign the primitive number to this attribute called curve ID. And as you can see, if we investigate that, you can see they've got different colors, meaning they've got a different each one's got a different attribute. And then we can trail these as they are spinning around, and we could say compute velocity. And this ensures that now as it spins, it's going to inherit the velocity of the spinning. Let's put an L. And let's call this out curves. Add another point VOP. and let's put the velocity in the velocity, and let's take a look at our velocity. So you can see as it moves, we, inheriting the velocity. I'm just going to change this to black so we can see it a bit better. And let's compute the cross product. And let's mix between the original position and the cross product. And that way we can just sort of control this with this mix node. So we're adding some of the cross product plus the original animation, and then we can also add some noise. And well, we're going to use the noise to vary between the original position and the cross product. So some of it's going to inherit the original motion, and some of it's going to inherit the velocities from the cross product, which will add some randomness. And let's resample this so we've got more points. Now we've got a lot of points. Save. And then let's randomize the velocity once again. So we're adding more velocity. This is currently set to set. We'll change that. Set it to direction and orientation. So you can see it's very noised up now. And we're going to add this. That way it's not resetting it, it's just adding some noise to its original position. Or original velocity, I should say. Let's add, and we could say delete geometry but keep points, because we've got a lot of points. And let's jitter these points. And let's merge that. So now these are thicker, kind of. Well, the points are moved around a bit, which inevitably will give us thicker lines. So before, and yeah. Save. Let's make an attribute crate. And we're creating an attribute called density. And we want to give that a value. And let's set this value to 1. So now all these points have a density attribute, and all the density is 1. Let's put down an attribute VOP. Plug this in, take the velocity and output velocity, and as you can see that's working. once again, let's add some noise. We can add a mix once again. And let's just, you know, keep it 50-50, pretty well, 30% of the one and 70% of the other. And then we can put down a Pyro source node. And we can say source smoke. Particle separation of 0.5. And actually we don't need that. We don't need to create that attribute because we're going to get it with the Pyro source. So we can just disable that. And then we can rasterize these attributes. And we can rasterize the density and the velocity. Temperature and the velocity. It looks weird in our viewport. Let's just play with these settings for now. Make it low res. Play with our particle scale. Maybe, yeah. Low res is fine for now. And make sure we've got the velocity. Well, it's captured by the velocity, and we're just adding a visibility to hide the velocity so it doesn't look weird in our viewport, but it doesn't actually get rid of anything. The data is all there, we're just hiding it in the viewport. Let's add a null. Out portal smoke. And let's put down a dot network. Color it red so we know it's important. Dive inside. And then we need our usual suspects. The a pyro solver, a volume source, and a smoke object. So there's our pyro source, our smoke object, and volume source. Plug these in and feed that out. So now we need to set this to source smoke, and let's plug this, copy it, and paste that null into here, and tick on enlarge fields to contain sources, increase the amount of density. Let's turn the temperature off for now, and let's increase the velocity. So now, as you can see, we have our smoke sim running. Pretty good start. Let's put a ground. Yeah, close boundaries. It's just, yeah, I got the wrong one here, so we need this the sparse one, and then we can set a ground. This is a bit high, so let's just lower it. -6.22, and cool. Now that that's kind of sitting where a portal would sit, I think, and let's save. So let's just play with our voxel scale, which is going to control the resolution, and we can limit the size of our domain here. And under the injection type, let's set this to BFCC and clamped. That's going to give us a bit more extra detail. And let's add a merge so we can add some micro solvers here. So let's add some gas turbulence. And the scale is 1, our swirl size is 2. Let's set this to simplex noise. Let's set it back to the default. So I think this one's giving us more detail. So let's make a copy of this. And let's change this value up, change the swirl size. So just like we did with the circles, we're just going to, give some variation, and we're going to do a big, medium, and small turbulence. So let's save. And let's make a smaller one. 0.2, 0.2. And so now we're just layering up those turbulences. This is giving us quite a decent amount of detail. We can accentuate some of the swirly motion in our sim by using a gas vortex confinement. Set this to 4. And this is plenty detail because we're just going to use the smoke to advect particles. Let's save. Let's jump back out here and let's import that information with the DOP import. DOP import fields. We need our object and our DOP network, and paste that in there, and we can say smoke. And all I'm really interested in is the density and the velocity. So let's put down a Pyro process, post-process. So this can optimize things. We want to convert to VDB, combine volumes, make 16-bit float. And let's put down a file cache. And I've got a preset that I've got saved. And this is my file path. I'm just going to create this in a folder called Portal Effects. Let's call it Portal Effects. And let's call this Portal Effects. Portal Smoke. And that $OS is going to pick up that name. So let's make this red. I always like to make my caches red so when I open a file, I know which nodes to cache. So let's save that disk, and now we want to set up a pop network. So we're going to bring in our points, we're going to bring in that curve, and we're going to bring in our smoke in the third input. And we had that reverse, and let's add that here. And we're going to set this to all points, use first context geometry, and under birth rate, we're going to bring our life expectancy down to 2, and we want to add some variation. So let's put 0.2 there. And as you can see, we're now spawning points, and they're flying out with the velocity. So let's add our ground plane. Let's merge that in. I think it was, we set it a little bit lower than the default. Let's go and take a look at our value. Minus 6.22. So we can copy this and come here and paste that minus 6.22. And now we've got our points colliding with the ground. Cool. So we're not using our smoke yet, or our second input, those curves. It's simply just the first input. So let's put down a pop network here just so we can visualize this a bit better. And let's compute the length of the velocity. And let's put that into a fit range so we can control those values a bit. Just promote these parameters, so the min and the max. And let's feed this into a color ramp so we can color our particles based on the length of the velocity. So let's feed this into the color, and here we need to find our min and max values. I'm just pitting this so we can take a look at this here, and let's add a color correct, and let's promote this so we can mess with this. Okay, so we need to find our min and max values. Let's make it 100. And we can select one of these presets. I think this blue color is cool. Let's darken that blue a bit. Cool, so now the faster colors are going to be white, and the slower parts are going to be that navy color. And let's mess with this a bit. So let's say advect by volumes, and our volumes are coming in the third input. So here we can see that. And let's hit third context geometry. And we want to advect by the velocity of our smoke. And as you can see now, our particles are moving with our smoke. Like our smoke is pushing those particles around. I'm just trying to reduce our number of points for now. Let's set it to all points, and let's rather reduce our points with a wrangle. So let's put down a wrangle here, and I've got a cool expression, and we're saying take some random points, and if those random points are greater than a threshold, so let's put a channel, and we could call this threshold. Then we're going to remove the points. So now we need to click this so we can bring up the slider, and now we can reduce the amount of points we have coming in here. So I'm just going to call this remove points, and we can save this as a preset. Save preset and say remove random points. Cool, so now this is just going to sim very quickly, and when we're ready for our high res we can just turn off that wrangle and we'll have our high res sim. So next, let's add a pop force. We're going to bring in those curves from our second context geometry, and I've got these figured out, and I'm going to set this to follow, and let's just take a look at what this is doing. It's kind of hard to see exactly what it's doing. So let's inherit this velocity up a lot. And you can see this is sort of an highly exaggerated version of what it's doing. So it's kind of pushing those particles away from those curves. This is obviously way too much. Let's bring this down. Bring it down again, so just moving it away from the center. I think that's cool. Let's add some pop drag, which I always like to add to simulations just to give it some air resistance, makes it feel more natural. Again, very subtle. Cool, so now we're going to put down a pop attract, and it's just it's under this force scale. Let's crank this up so we can see what it's doing. And it's kind of like almost like a blurring of the position, so the particles are sort of clumping together a little bit more. So we just add a little bit of that. A pop force. Here we can add a gravity or downward force, and now we'll have some particles falling down as if they have some weight to them. Let's just crank this up a bit. You can see now they're definitely falling down. Now it kind of looks a bit more like water. And let's just set this to something reasonable like 5. And let's add another pop force. And let's give it some swirl size. And this is just going to break it up a bit. As you can see here, if we make it extreme, we exaggerate it and then dial it back. So just a little bit like 4. Again, another pop force, and let's just layer this up like we did with our turbulence. This is kind of like a turbulence on the particles. Let's add another one. Let's add another offset. And our swirl size, bring it down. Cool. Let's make a pop group. And let's call this outside. And let's, this is the size I had dialed in. And as you can see, we're now selecting that middle part. Let's change this to a sphere. It's a box at the moment. Let's style this. Yeah, that's the correct size. And we're going to invert it because we want to select the outside parts. And let's make it a bounding sphere. Cool. Add a pop attract. And we're going to affect the outside points. And let's put down a dop network, and then let's import these points. We just want the pop object, that way we don't bring in the ground. And we can remove some of these attributes. So let's delete everything but the position, the velocity, the age, the ID, the life maybe. No, it's just, yeah, that should be enough. Cool. So if we tick on delete non-selected, and we can move our color ramp here, and then let's file cache. Let's cache this to disk. Once again, make it red. Call this popsim cache. We've got our presets, and I'm just saving this to somewhere on disk. Let's copy it from here. Portal effect. And it's cached to disk. I also want the UVs, and that's on, yeah. Save it to disk again. Let's mess with our range a little bit. I'm just going to dial in this a bit. Yeah, that looks cool. Split the difference. And now we're kind of coloring this based on its velocity. So the faster moving part's lighter, and the slow part's darker. Let's put down a wrangle, and let's create a new attribute called U, and we're going to base it on the UVs that we had. And now we can take a color, and we can inherit the color from our from what we sourced it from, which we created UVs, and this is going to give us some very interesting color. So we're overwriting that previous color currently, but I like this. I think this looks really cool, and we can mix between the two. So this is really kind of helping with the swirly motion. You can see how the portal is swirling around a bit better, but I want this combined with our velocity. So we can use this as our color and maybe use the velocity almost like a color correct, or you can think of it that way, but really just going to mix between the two. So let's give this some sort of like candy floss feeling color. Something magical, I guess. Just styling this in to what I had before. Cool. Cool, so I'm really happy with these colors. I think this looks really cool. Cool, so let's now do that mixing between the two colors. So let's put down a blend shape, and we can take the original color and the new color, and we set this to points, and all we need to do is blend between the two. Let's do a quick flip book. Cool, I just want to set the P scale, and the way that I like to normally check this is I just put down a copy to points, make sure I have packed and instance ticked on so we don't crash, plug this in, and then we can just add a sphere with a radius of 1, and then we can inspect our particle scale. So as you can see, this is pretty big. Let's put down a wrangle, and let's remove points just so that this goes faster. And what we can do here is we can isolate all the points that are close to each other by using a PC find and measuring the length. So I need to use this length array length. Set it to initial array. And let's plug this into the color just so we can investigate it. Let's put a foot range so we can control it. And let's find the correct value. So those are all just black. The white specks is just the specular. So 50, you can see now we're sort of isolating the ones that are clumped together. And let's bind export this and say call this P scale. So now the ones that are clumped together are going to have a higher value. Or a value of 1, and when they're far away they're going to go down to 0. So this way we could isolate this just as, you know, all the closest parts, and but let's also multiply this down. So now we're really just isolating the points that are very close together. Maybe we could use this as like some sort of light emission if you wanted. Select even less, select even more. Now these are all too close. But the ones that are floating away, those will sort of fade down to nothing, which is cool. Where they kind of scale down as they isolate themselves. And that's pretty much it for our simulation side of things. And in the next tutorial we'll cover the rendering part. Cool, so I hope you guys liked the simulation part, and I'll see you in the next one.